Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Father's Day. And I want to wish my dad, Ralph, who may or may not be watching, happy Father's Day, and my stepdad, Laverne, who may or may not be watching, and all the dads in the room, whether you're a dad of a human or an animal, or whether you have a father in spirit, happy Father's Day. It's a beautiful day. As many of you know, Dr. Gary and Dr. Jane are at a ministers' conference at Unity Village, and they asked me to give the message today, which is a great honor. And they're probably watching right now. So let's just say hello. Hello. But because this is my first time speaking in this capacity, I'm a little bit nervous, just a little bit. So I appreciate having such a supportive audience. So thank you all for being here. It's really an honor to be here, and I hope that I can bring something to you today. That is my goal. Oh, thank you. See if this works. Okay. Off and running. Here we go. So in 2002, I had my first spiritual breakdown in a bathroom in Brazil. Okay? How's that for a starter? I was 27 at the time, and I was living in Brazil teaching English, and I had to go home because my visa had expired. I was technically in the country illegally. And so I wanted to stay in Brazil, but at the same time, I actually really didn't. I didn't want to leave, but I also didn't want to go. And so I felt lost. And I was confused. I was unsure of who I was, what I was, why I was, all the questions. And so one night, my roommate, she was out of town, and I was packing my suitcases real glumly, realizing that I had to leave. And I was in the bathroom, I don't know, and all of a sudden I had this thought. And I was just thinking, what is the point? What's the point of life? What am I doing with my life? Why do I exist? Is it just so I can, go around and go, I don't know, teach English in Brazil or do whatever? I didn't get it. And so what happened was I just fell apart right there on the bathroom floor. And so at that moment, I started praying. And honestly, it was more than praying. It was actually begging God. It was begging. Let's call it that. It was praying God for help. And so I just remember just being, just overcome with emotion and just saying, help me God, help me God, help me God. Just, fist to the heavens, what have you. It was very dramatic. And so, and up until that point in my life, prayer wasn't really something I'd done. And frankly, it was something I had resisted doing. It felt a little bit desperate to me. I kind of thought it was a weakness, honestly. I thought it was kind of for wimpy people who, couldn't take life by the horns and do things their own way, which is what I kind of, thought I had done up until that point. And looking back, I can see those thoughts and feelings came from my own religious upbringing and the beliefs that I was taught and that I knew. And as many of you know from my transformational story, and for those of you who don't, I was raised in a pretty strict religious cult. And what I was taught about God and the Bible and life in general, it really didn't resonate with me, but it was what I knew. And so when I was old enough to do so, I kind of just threw it all out. I compartmentalized my religious upbringing, put it in a nice little box, and then just shipped it out. Didn't need it anymore. And that included prayer. Prayer to me was part of that little box. And so I just let it all go. And just charted my own course, is what I thought, until my bathroom breakdown. And at that moment, prayer seemed like the only thing I could do. That was the only thing I could do, was just beg, pray to God for help. I felt desperate, lost, and broken. So I left the bathroom floor that day, it was funny because I felt like, okay, got that out of my system. Done. 30, 45 minutes of just pure drama. Okay, got it out of my system. It felt good. I'm good now. So I was thinking, what's next? Okay, I'm going to go back to packing my bags and going back home. So I went back to the States, and I ended up moving back in with my mom, who lived in Post Falls. And it was funny. It was the first time in my life that I felt depressed. Of course, I'd had moments of sadness in my life, but this felt really heavy. It felt like something that was not going to go away. And so, at that time, I was 27. I felt like I was kind of starting over. I didn't have a job or a career or a 401k or a house, or a husband or kids or anything that the society around me expected or inquired about. They asked those types of questions and I didn't have an answer. And so I felt a little bit like a failure. And I mean, up until that point, I'd had an amazing travel-filled life, tons of adventure, did everything that I thought I wanted to do, but it just didn't seem like enough. It was not enough. And so one day, I'm back at home, and I went to visit my mom at the Coeur d'Alene Library where she worked, and I was in one of the stacks, and I was kind of embarrassed, and my mom came to see me, and I was just bawling my eyes out, per usual. I was just crying a lot. And so she suggested we go have lunch and talk. And so while I was waiting for her, I saw a book on display at the library, and I picked it up, and I looked at the cover, and it somewhat repulsed. I put it back. And I'll tell you what the book title was in a minute. So I put it back. I was like, no, that's not for me. But my mom saw what I did, and so she came over to me and she said, "Oh, Amber, why don't you check that book out?" And I was like, "Why? Have you read it?" Really sassy, because I was feeling down and I was just taking it out on anybody. "Why, Mom? Have you read it?" And she said, "No, but we're in a library. You can check it out, take it home." And probably what she was thinking is, besides, you don't really have a job and you're just moping around, so why not read? Honestly, I think that's what she was thinking. I was resistant, but my mom was adamant, and so I checked out the freaking book. And I took it home, and I started reading it, and I knew from the very first page of that book that my Brazil breakdown prayer had been answered. The book was titled Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. Many of you are familiar with that book, and for those of you who aren't, it's a book about the author's kind of anger toward life and, kind of frustration with all the things that he was going through and the highs and lows and what was the point. And it was everything that I was thinking and feeling at that moment. And so what he did was he started writing a letter to God because he's mad and he wanted, just to get it out. But what was surprising is that he got answers to his questions. And they were really funny and poignant and sassy and sarcastic, all the things that we are, right? And so when I was reading those answers, I felt like these are the answers I've been looking for my whole life. This is what I believe. This is what I want to believe. And so honestly, that book was my first kind of introduction, my first preview into the God that I had always wanted to believe was true in my heart, but that I was never told existed. I honestly felt when I was reading the pages that God was talking directly to me, and that it was put squarely into my hands thanks to my Brazil breakdown, because I was ready for it. I was ready for it. So I read the entire book in one day and just, cried the whole time. And, that book led to other books, to other books, to other books. But everything shifted for me in that moment, after that first page. I immediately felt permission to see and experience life differently. Like everything that had ever happened to me had real purpose and meaning. Thanks to that book, I no longer felt lost. And maybe I wasn't completely found, but I had a glimmer of hope. My soul had a clear direction, and my mission, which I chose to accept, was to follow it, knowing there was purpose. One of the most profound parts of the conversation revolved around the lies that we believe about God. And then this truth bomb, which was an exchange between Walsch, the author, and God about the truth of God and where it comes from. And so, I have it up on the screen, but Neale Donald Walsch says, "But my truth about God comes from you, God." And God is like, "Well, who said so?" And I can just imagine the voice, like, "Oh, really? Who said so?" Walsch, "Others. What others? Leaders, ministers, rabbis, priests, books, the Bible, for heaven's sake. Those are not authoritative sources." What? Oh my gosh, this was shocking to me. Well, they aren't? No. Then what is? That is the question. And God says, listen to your feelings. Listen to your highest thoughts. Listen to your experience. Whenever any one of these differ from what you've been told by your teachers or read in your books, forget the words. Words are the least reliable purveyor of truth. Boom. I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And so my talk this morning is titled, Your Soul's Mission If You Choose to Accept It. And I want to include the following caveat, which is, and if you don't accept it, well, it's happening anyway, so you better hang on tight. And I love this picture because here's my analogy when I was looking at this. The guy that's like this, that's your soul. The parachute is kind of like God. And then you're kind of strapped on, your tandem with your soul, just hanging on, allowing yourself to be guided, to be, taken safely to earth, ideally. So I like the idea of having a soul mission, and it feels very true to me. So let's see, where am I? Okay, in her wonderful message last week, Dr. Jane asked us to investigate what it is that breaks our heart. What is it that creates a stirring in our soul that causes us to want to take authentic, heart-centered action? And when I asked myself this question, several things popped up. But what really came through for me was, issues of social injustice, inequality, and prejudice against groups that are considered others. When I hear about or witness discrimination or unfair treatment of anyone, especially those in marginalized groups, I feel a lot of pain in my soul. And I feel impassioned, like I'm on fire and I want to do something. But then I thought about it even more and went a little bit deeper. And I realized that based on my own painful life experiences, the thing that really breaks my heart the most is the faulty belief systems that lie, figuratively and literally, behind so much of the injustice and the inequality and the prejudice and the pain and the suffering that we humans experience and inflict upon one another. Specifically, the lies that we believe about God and in turn ourselves. And so it is my soul's mission to counteract these lies whenever I can. And it's hard because they're so ingrained in me and in many of us. And so when we're faced with them or we acknowledge them, my goal is really to uncover them so that I can learn the truth, which is part of my soul's mission. Now, I feel like there are a lot of lies out there about God that many of us have internalized, so I just want to talk about the top 3 big ones that I personally believed and that kind of affected me the most. And also, of course, I want to cover the awesome power of these lies in finding the capital T truth about God, Spirit, the universe. There are many names for God, but what these beautiful truths can reveal about our own lives and our own mission, our own soul's mission. What are these top 3 lies, you wonder? I bet you're curious. They are, in no particular order. God's a dude. Come on. No offense, dudes. God doesn't like mistakes. Mistakes are sin. God is out there, separate from me. That one's the biggest, the big one. Okay, so let's go to lie number 1, or the first one I've got. God's a dude. Okay, so growing up, I thought God was like this big, booming guy up in the clouds who was kind of looking down on all of us little ants, and kind of happy when we were doing things that we were supposed to, and kind of annoyed and disturbed when we were doing things we weren't supposed to. And I do remember vividly looking up, sometimes as a kid, looking up in the clouds and thinking, oh, maybe I'll catch a glimpse of God today. Let's see. And I'd look, and then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh God, no, don't, look down. Because I was afraid I'd make eye contact, and then he'd know that I was in big trouble. Catch-22, I was kind of like, ooh. But looking back now, I can see how this belief manifested. My developing mind thought our church's ministers were what God looked like, and acted like, and sounded like. And they were all older white males with families, who seemed to have it all figured out. They had what it took for God's love, and they did what they needed to do to secure their place in heaven and in the kingdom. They were also experts on the Bible, and which I was not. I actually didn't really like the Bible. It didn't resonate with me. It didn't feel approachable. But I was like, okay, they're doing what they need to do, and they're telling me what I need to do. And so when I heard the sermons, I remember a lot of him and he, a lot. And I just thought, okay. And I almost never heard a she or a her. And if you did, it was like somebody was pregnant, given birth to God, or somebody was a prostitute, it didn't resonate with me. And so I just figured, it was kind of matter of fact. Someone like me, a girl, wasn't really part of the Bible or godly things. That wasn't for me. That was literally my thought process. That's not for me. I wasn't mad about it. I just thought, okay, I don't belong there. And also these men of God weren't particularly warm to me or my single mother or my unruly little brother. I believed we were not worthy of their time and attention, and so therefore it kind of just, made sense that we weren't really worthy of God's time or attention. And so, and of course, no one told me I was unworthy. Of course not. Nobody said that. Actually, what they said was the opposite. But these were just things I intuited and absorbed based on the belief system I was surrounded by. And while I never, ever, it's funny because I think about it, and I liked who I was. I thought I was pretty funny, and, I was pretty outgoing and chipper. And I liked who I was when I was with my friends or with my family or, with other people. But when I went to church, I was kind of like, ooh, I kind of feel like a loser here. This doesn't resonate with me. And so while I never wished that I was someone else so that I could be loved by God, I did wish for a God that was more like me. That was my wish. And I want to say that thanks to this lie, which I needed for my own growth and relearning, the absolute unchanging truth that I've come to understand through this life journey, through Unity, through my classes, my ministerial classes, is that God is love. And it sounds so simple. It's kind of, okay, what does that mean? But it's really powerful when I sink my heart into it. The energy of love encompasses all that is considered masculine, all that is considered feminine, and beyond, because we are much more than gendered beings, so much more. And this loving universal energy encompasses every single one of us. Okay, so lie number 2. God doesn't like mistakes. Mistakes are sin. Again, in the belief system I grew up in, we focused a lot on doing. What you did was important. And very little focus on being, how you were being in the world. That didn't really matter. And so we got most of our information about what to do from our ministers and the leader of the religion. If we had a list of all the things we couldn't do, it would be a book, a very thick book. It'd be like the Bible of things you can't do, basically. And so it was kind of hard to keep track of. There were so many things that I didn't, I just kind of thought, well, I'm going to probably screw up anyway, so might as well just try, right? It was things like don't wear makeup, don't eat certain foods, don't watch TV on Saturday, don't kill people. That one was easy. That one I got. Yeah, that was good. Don't participate in school holidays, don't date outside the church, don't watch movies like E.T. or Splash. So that one got me. I was like, okay, somebody show me in the Bible where God's telling me I can't watch E.T. because if it's an alien, or Splash because it's a mermaid. And I of course challenged these things because as a kid you want to watch E.T. Luckily my mom was very cool and was like, oh, Amber, you can watch E.T. No, that's silly. But of course, these rules were someone else's interpretation of what was in the Bible, and we just had to go along with it. My best friend Shannon and I would push some of these boundaries and rules because we were such rebels. And, we would sneak TV on Friday nights or, eat some ham or something that we weren't supposed to do. And I remember one time we went trick-or-treating, and in our church, we didn't believe in Halloween, but she and I were so motivated. We just saw people doing it. We thought, oh, that's so cool. We want to do this. And we were also, we wanted some candy. And so we, dressed up and went trick-or-treating. And mind you, we were 16. I was 16 and she was 19 at the time. So we were like those older kids that come to the door that people are kind of annoyed by, but we didn't really care. But guess what happened? I was dressed like a hippie, I was wearing Birkenstocks, and I jumped over a pile of rocks, and I landed wrong and ended up like fracturing my ankle. Ooh, I know, I was like, we thought for sure God was punishing us for that mistake. For doing something we weren't supposed to do. But it was totally worth it, we were fine. And, in all seriousness, the lie that God doesn't like mistakes or that God punishes sin is really, truly a dangerous one. Especially when it comes to an internalized belief that says, I'm wrong or I'm a mistake, simply by being who I am. This lie can detour us from living our soul's mission. It's the one that can prevent us from living an authentic, purpose-driven life. It's the one that can cause shame, self-hatred, and self-harm. It's also the one that perpetuates judgment and hate against other groups for what is deemed sinful in the eyes of God. It's Pride Month, as many of you know, and there's nothing that fires me up more than the faulty belief system that many churches teach, including the one I grew up in, about LGBTQ plus people. It's frankly church-sanctioned discrimination that has had horrific consequences on millions of people and families worldwide. And of course, these are good people who want to do the right thing, but are constrained by a faulty and false belief system. At Unity, we teach that we are spirit beings having a human experience. And so our very existence, our very being in the world, however that looks or feels, is on purpose and is part of our soul's mission here. And who we have come here to be is never a mistake or a sin. There's just no such thing. So what about the perceived choices or decisions we make that seem to derail our life in one way or another? Or the mistakes that feel really bad? Or the ones that created unintended consequences for ourselves and others? What about those? Well, according to Unity Teachings, and I just took a class on this, and I really loved what I learned here, the truth is you cannot make a wrong choice or a bad decision. Isn't that cool? I'll tell you why. Eric Butterworth, in his book titled The Flow of Life, states, the only predestiny in life is the ultimate unfoldment of the divine creature you are. You're all divine creatures, everybody. There is a creative intention working in you. It is a force that transcends mistakes and wrong choices and makes all things work for good. In other words, mistakes are part of your soul's mission, and you are expanding your consciousness in ways it could not have been expanded had you not made the mistake. So you just have to make the mistake. Please, make the mistake. It's all part of your divine mission. Isn't that good news? Yeah. Thank you. I felt that too. Butterworth goes on to explain the following. Yes. So a wrong choice is a right choice at that particular time. Know this, you are free from the fear of bad decisions. You can stand still and believe that there is no decision to be made, only a direction to discover. Right? Thank you, Katie. So the next time you make a mistake, you can just say, oh, it's a new direction to discover. That's what I'm going to do. And the more we listen to that inner voice, that inner spirit, that higher self feeling, the clearer our direction gets. So this leads to the third and biggest lie, in my opinion, which is, God is out there, separate from me. Like many of us, I grew up believing God was an external force that existed, out there, and that I alone could not know what God needed or expected of me. I had to trust others, those who really knew God, and had the inside information to tell me what to do and how to be. But this version of God left me feeling judged, powerless, and alone. And so I did what many of us do. I edged God out, which is what Wayne Dyer calls the ego, edging God out. Isn't that good? Edging God out. If what I was taught about this great creator was true, I remember feeling like I had no use for it. I don't like being judged. Nobody does. But that's what I was feeling. And so I flowed along with my life, putting that box away, trusting that I could do it all on my own and that everything was going to work out. That is until my Brazil bathroom breakdown. Let's call it that. My desperate plea that day was for meaning. I wanted to know that there was something greater, something divine working within me, not outside of me. I wanted this monumental lie to be exposed and to reveal the absolute truth of myself and every being on the planet, that the Spirit of God existed inside all of us. And that is exactly what happened. Father Richard Rohr, do any of you know Father Richard Rohr? Yeah, if you don't, I just was introduced to his work recently. He's a Franciscan priest, Bible scholar, and Christian mystic, and I'm currently reading his latest book titled The Universal Christ. There's a quote in this book, I'm not kidding you, it blew my mind. It brought me to tears and essentially deconstructs every single lie ever told about God in 6 words. And it also confirms every single truth. Rohr writes, God loves things by becoming them. I want you to let that sink in for a minute, because for me, it's got this kind of gravitational pull that I can't release myself from. God loves things by becoming them. It means, because the Spirit of God exists inside every living being, we are never alone. We are not alone in our joy or our pain, in our greatest love or our deepest fear. We're not alone lounging by the pool in Brazil or bawling on the bathroom floor. We're not alone the moment we take our first breath or our last. It also means that what we love becomes God. Our family members, our friends, our animals, our pets, our plants, trees, a sunset, whatever it is that you love, God is in that. Whatever we're loving, God is inhabiting. And so your soul's mission, if you choose to accept it, but remember, you have no choice. You really don't. Is to uncover the lies that you have believed to be true about God and yourself, so that you can allow the ultimate unfoldment of the divine creature you are to come forth and bless this world in the way that only you can. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you.